Rob, we'll see you then. If you've been watching ABC 45 tonight, you just saw Primetime Live. The show focused on the merits of hidden camera reporting and where people think the line should be drawn when gathering a news story. Diane Sawyer discussed the issue with jurors from the ABC Food Line trial in a segment she taped last week in Greensboro. But the network coverage doesn't stop there. In about 30 minutes, Nightline anchor Ted Koppel will host a special edition of Viewpoint live from Wake Forest University. And that's where we find Rich Parsons. He's been working tonight's cover story.
Well, even Ted Koppel admits that he hopes tonight's broadcast brings ABC News some good publicity, but he says that's not the reason the network is turning its news cameras on itself in the growing debate over just how far journalists should go investigating a story.
That is to as fairly and reasonably put the issue out there for the public so that people can look at it and say either I think that's a load of malarkey or maybe there's a point that I hadn't thought of before.
It's in their best interest to do something like that. But I think there's probably somewhere a genuine interest in this story.
But Nightline's executive producer, Tom Batag, says the journalistic issues being discussed in tonight's town hall meeting in Waite Chapel go well beyond just how journalists operate.
I think there's a whole feeling that journalists have gotten too big, too cocky, too big for their britches. And I think it's not just this, but that this is the tip of an iceberg, that journalists really have to stop and say, are we really public servants? Are we really out here, first and foremost, to help and inform democracy?
And Nightline's goal tonight isn't really to provide answers to those questions as much as it is to sort of reach an understanding with news viewers from the network's perspective over just why journalists do what they do, and to sort of learn from viewers why many seem to be becoming more distrustful of the media.
Rich, about 2,400 people are at Waite Chapel tonight to watch Viewpoint live. What's the mood like on campus?
Well, I get the sense that there's a lot of curiosity in the air. A lot of people feel like ABC in particular and the media in general coming in here sort of on the defensive, and they're very interested in seeing just how it is they justify doing what they do and going as far as they do sometimes and getting a story. So it should be very interesting to hear what everybody has to say on all sides of this issue.
Yes, it will. Thank you. Rich Parsons live at Wake Forest. Earlier tonight, ABC's Primetime Live devoted its entire show to investigative journalism and the ABC Food Line trial. Now, we wondered how future lawyers and journalists would handle this case. Our team coverage continues with Keith Yaskin.
Well, Sharon, we've heard from the lawyers and some of the media's major voices out here about the Food Line ABC case, but tonight we want to listen to some of the younger voices about similar cases in the future. So we invited two Wake Forest students to come to our studios and watch Primetime Live in our newsroom. Doug Ballier is a second-year law student at Wake Forest University, working toward being a corporate attorney one day, and Ashley Quesenberry is a first-year graduate student in communication studies at Wake Forest, studying to be a media relations job, or have a job in media relations, something of that sort, a future lawyer and a future member of the media. First, undercover reporting involves some deception. What's acceptable?
I think that by focusing on the issues of deception, the public's attention gets shifted away from the real issue at hand, and that's whether or not Food Line did have some misconduct in the way they handled their food. Food Line sued ABC over the issues of fraud and trespassing, and by doing this, they kind of sidestepped their own misconduct.
Doug?
I agree that the public has a right to know the type of information that ABC provided in its coverage. However, that doesn't get away from the fact that ABC did violate the law in obtaining this story. So I think when you're considering a case of this nature, that you have to consider both components.
You look at some of these ABC outtakes and you hear some employees say, we're going to get them, or darn when things don't go a certain way. Is that sloppy reporting?
I think when you look at the situation of like the comments that you just were talking about and the fact that these ABC employees allowed the customers to leave the store with bad products, it does make one question whether or not the ABC's intent was the best interest of the public or just obtaining the story. In hindsight, it's kind of easy to look and say you messed up here or you messed up there. Well, you have to realize they didn't have that information at the time necessarily.
Ashley, I'm running out of time. Quick answer.
I think it's also easy to get stuck on things that you could have done in hindsight and I think the most important thing is the end result, the story that gets out to the public.
Very good. Opinions from two people who may be handling this case for real one day. Sharon? Going back to you, Sharon, I think.
Well, as we've been showing you, Wake Forest University is playing host to ABC's Viewpoint program tonight. For a school with less than 6,000 students, Wake has been getting a lot of attention. And as Trey Hardison reports, you can't accuse the Demon Deacons of suffering from stage fright.
It's a dream come true for any school. A perennial top 5 athletic program.
4 and 5. Let me tell you what happens.
And Diane Sawyer and Ted Koppel holding their own court on campus. For a small school, Wake Forest gets lots of exposure.
I think most of the publicity that will attach to these events is all very positive.
The school isn't a stranger to the limelight. In 1988, presidential candidates aired out their grievances on campus before a live audience. And Wake sports teams play on the highest levels, a record of success that can affect a school's bottom line.
Whether or not this will be the kind of event that would have a big jolt on the admissions process, I'm not sure. I'm frankly right about it.
Wake Forest students are already caught up in the hoopla, though.
Well, everyone's very excited on campus, and everyone's thrilled. Even though we all have a lot to do, we're all excited. Everyone's really interested about what's going on.
It's been a real tough week with classes and stuff, but I know people who have exams tomorrow, and they're coming out to everything, going to the game, going to Nightline tonight.
I don't think it's had any negative effects whatsoever. If anything, it's really brought us closer together as a school. You know, I mean, look at all the screaming demons.
The Deacons don't seem to mind a little overexposure either. Trey Hardison, ABC 45 News.
Once again, we want to remind you that the special edition of Viewpoint originating live from Wake Forest will air at 11:35 immediately following this newscast. And we will have a complete wrap-up of the network activity and Piedmont reaction on the morning edition at 6:30 and the evening edition tomorrow night at 6.